welcome again, everybody. It's wonderful to have you for another instalment of our Discover Wildlife evenings. We are joined tonight by Ian Loyd, who's one of our team members, and he's going to be talking to you about the Pantanal. Ian has worked for us for a few years now. He looks after an incredible array of tours all around the world. He has experience in Brazil and is sort of in charge of developing all of our trips there and making sure they run smoothly, which he does a fabulous job of. And on top of that, I've known Ian for more than 10 years now. So he's worked in the industry for a while and has a real passion for the natural world. So we're very excited to have Ian talking tonight. There's a couple of housekeeping things I need to bring up. For those of you that are interested in asking questions, there is the opportunity to ask them either using the chat functionality, which you should find on your screens, but there's also the Q&A functionality as well. So please feel free to ask those questions, and at the end we will be making time specifically to answer those. So Ian will be on hand to answer those questions and hopefully give you all the extra information that you're interested in. On top of that, at the end of the talk, I will launch a poll as well, and the poll gives you an opportunity to request information, documentation, itineraries on certain trips that you might be interested in. So if you're interested in anything, please let us know using the poll functionality. But now, hopefully, Ian is waiting in the wings and we can bring him in. Just to let you know, Ian has a slight delay on his internet connection today. It has been working, but there might be the odd occasion when there's a little bit of a delay. And there is a delay between myself and Ian. But yes,
thank you very much, Brett.
When Ian is ready, I will hand you over.
Thank you very much, Brett. Sorry, I do seem to have a bit of a delay this evening. I'm based down in deepest Devon, so it may be something to do with that. I'm delighted to be talking to you about the Pantanal. And the Pantanal is an area I visited on a number of occasions. And where is it? It's right in the center of the South American continent. And it's the world's largest wetland. And it can really be divided into two quite distinct areas, which can be visited in two gateways. So most visited, the northern Pantanal. The gateway to that is the city Cuiaba. And from there you can travel south to the end of a road called the Transpantanera, where you reach a small fishing village of Porto Joffre. And there's a number of lodges all the way along this Transpantanera highway. And then in the south, the access is really from the city of Campo Grande. And that's in the state of Mato Grosso do Sul, which most visitors tend to visit the northern Pantanal, but actually the southern Pantanal is where most of the sort of the typical landscapes can be found. And there's a greater range of species on offer there. So I'll take you through both of these regions. So the Pantanal is essentially a big floodplain. It's a bowl really in terms of its landscape. And for much of the year, it's flooded, and this water is mostly coming from the surrounding mountains, rather than water that actually falls within the Pantanal itself. It's with grasslands, gallery forests, seasonal lakes and oxbow lakes, and it's fed by many large rivers. And it has this very distinct two seasons. So in the wet through to the end of May, the Pantanal becomes completely flooded. It floods sort of north to south, with most of the flood waters coming from the mountains to the north. And it's really inaccessible at this time for most areas. And the wildlife is also very dispersed. It's the dry season. This is a picture taken at the beginning of the dry season to illustrate just what a dramatic difference the water level shows. So even within probably a few weeks to a month or so, this water level has dropped from the bank and the tree here, the start of June, all the way through to sort of mid-November. And as this water level is dropping, more and more of the riverbanks are becoming exposed. The seasonal ponds and wetlands are starting to dry up. And to give you an idea of what the Pantanal's all about, it's really the best place on the whole of the South American continent for wildlife viewing. You have the greatest gatherings of wildlife anywhere on that continent. The Pantanal is home to over 350 species of freshwater fish. And this diversity of fish attracts a huge number of predators. So this is the Yakari caiman, and it's a species you find all over the Pantanal. On a daily basis, you'll be seeing them. And to give you an idea of the concentrations, 1 million of these caiman across the Pantanal, which is the greatest concentration of crocodilians on the planet. And it's quite easy to see towards the end of the dry season, pools with hundreds of these caiman jostling space, trying to eat the last remaining fish. It's really quite spectacular. What makes the Pantanal so special is really it's the best outside of sort of Africa and Asia. If you're new to visiting the South American continent, the Pantanal offers the closest experience you can have to an African style safari in South America. Many areas of South America are extremely rich in biodiversity, but actually seeing wildlife in some of those areas, so tropical rainforests and the sort of Andean mountains or Patagonian steppes, it can be quite challenging at times. But in contrast to this, the Pantanal is a very open landscape, and in the dry season, the wildlife is very conspicuous, very concentrated, and just in high abundance wildlife experience you can have in Latin America. This is one of the most iconic species you'll see, capybara, the world's largest rodent. And this is another key species for the region. It's the jaguar stork, wading in the sort of shallow ponds and wetlands at the side of roads as you enter the Pantanal. And it's the tallest flying bird in South America. And it's a real spectacular species to watch as well, because they'll use their big feet to feel and try to disturb fish in these pools. And not just fish, but even small snakes. People have seen them catching small anacondas even. And they're quite an opportunistic member of the stork family. So a highlight. This is another typical scene you'll find in particularly the northern Pantanal, where the landscape is more sort of swampy. There's generally speaking a lot more sort of wetland visible within the northern Pantanal. This is a wattled jacana. And all these receding waters are perfect conditions for species such as kingfisher. There's 5 species of kingfisher which can be readily seen on visits to the Pantanal, and you can get great views of them. This is a neotropical cormorant as well, making the most of the fishing opportunities. In addition to the abundance of life, there's also some very iconic species to enjoy on a visit to the Pantanal. This is the species for the area. It's the world's largest member of the parrot family. I think has to be one of the top birds to see anywhere in the world. A really spectacular species. And they do very well in the Pantanal, particularly these days. At one stage during the 1980s, their population did get quite low, only around 1,500. And today there's about 5,000. So they've really benefited from the rise and awareness of conservation, but the rise of ecotourism to the Pantanal, with many of the lodges, which were essentially cattle ranches, now having ecotourism operations, and they've set up nest boxes and left nesting. So it's a real success story to see hyacinth macaws now right across the Pantanal. And this is one of the other key reasons to visit the Pantanal. This is a jaguar, the first one I ever saw when I first visited the Pantanal back in 2010. And 20 plus years ago, if you'd have asked me, where could we go and look for jaguars, there wouldn't have been many places. They really were one of the mythical, really just seen by a handful of field biologists, rarely even featured in natural history, very elusive creatures of dense forest. Fast forward to today, and jaguars are among the most reliable big cats to see anywhere. This is a picture that Brett took as well. And Today on our trips, it's not uncommon to see 15 plus different individual jaguars over a 4 or 5 night stay in certain areas of the Pantanal. The Pantanal is home to the greatest density of jaguars anywhere. And that's really thanks to just the abundance of prey for them. So they're able to occur at densities that they just don't occur in most of their range. And this, alongside the rise of ecotourism, has really helped the jaguar become a species that's gone from being a holy grail species to see in the wild to one that's can be enjoyed on many of our group trips now. So to give you an overview, firstly of the northern Pantanal, there's one main sort of route into this area. And you firstly would take a flight, usually from Sao Paulo, to the city of Cuiabá. And from there, you drive about 90 kilometers south to reach an area, or a road, sorry, called the Transpantaneira. And this is a famous dirt track, essentially, that takes you deep into the heart of the northern Pantanal. It's about 144 village of Porto Joffre, where there's nowhere else to go other than to head out by river. There's no more sort of road access after that point. And there's 120 odd bridges you cross as you travel along the Transpantaneira. And it's a fantastic introduction to what the Pantanal is all about. There's many lodges that are scattered along the length of the Transpantaneira. And these form usually sort of the first port of call for many people. Different sort of habitats on offer, some different species that can be seen. And quite quickly, as you head into the Transpantaneira, you'll start to see flocks of wood storks and roseate spoonbills, often hundreds of egrets and herons. At the first, juvenile rufescent tiger heron, a really spectacular species that you tend to see quite early on. And this is another species to look out for, particularly in the sort of slightly drier parts, just as you enter the Transpantaneira. It's the red-legged Sarima, quite similar to Africa's secretary bird, but a species that likes to stalk around the long grass areas, looking for anything they can find, really. They're omnivorous, opportunistic feeders, but often they'll be looking for reptiles and things like snakes as well, which if you're to see, they might catch, and you'll see their interesting bit of smashing them against hard surfaces to then kill the prey before eating it. Which is quite fascinating to watch. And as you head further down the Transpantaneira, you'll start to reach some marshy areas, because most endangered species of deer and its largest. This is the marsh deer, a really beautiful species that's Pantanal. There's very good chances to see them, particularly in the sort of wet areas in the day as well. And there's a variety of lodges to stay at along the Transpantaneira. And it's a really good idea to stay at some of these because it takes an entire day of traveling to do that. So it's good to break up this journey. And there's a variety of lodges you can stay at. Most of these are converted sort of fazendas or cattle farms, essentially. And this one is South Wild Pantanal, one that we use very regularly. Most of these lodges are fairly rustic, but all comfortable and geared towards maximizing the wildlife experience. One of the features of these lodges is that they have bird feeders, and often the first thing you'll see when you sort of come out your door early in the morning is a plethora of neotropical bird species. So if you've never been to the neotropics before, South America, then it's great to just have an introduction to some of the common species and families of birds that are on offer here. So these are scaled doves, a really beautiful species that you'll often find feeding just on the ground. You'll often get your first sighting of hyacinth macaws at some of these lodges, where nest boxes have been put up and the macaws are very used to people. You can sometimes see them feeding on the akuri nuts, which they specialize in, using that incredible beak to prise open very solid nuts to get at the pulp inside. And another favourite is the toko toucan, which is again a species regularly coming to feeders at many of these lodges down the Transpantaneira. It's the largest species of toucan, and they do very well in the Pantanal, with the more open woodlands is their sort of preferred habitat. And it's not just the birds that come to lodges. This is a crab-eating fox, And true to its name, it does eat crabs, freshwater crabs that are found in the middle of South America. They mainly feed upon these in the wet season, when the Pantanal is in flood. And then in the dry season, they become more opportunistic. Food for the birds will attract crab-eating foxes, giving a great chance to see them. And the other mammals you may encounter at these lodges include the Azara's agouti, often found on the edge of gallery forests that border some of these lodges, or wherever there's fruiting trees, they're often nearby looking for fallen fruit. And there's a range of activities you can do from these lodges down the Trans-Pantanera. You can take game drives, both during the day and the night. You can go on sort of walking safaris, often through gallery forest or around the edge of the wetlands. And you can take boat trips, which are often on smaller rivers such as the Pishaim River, or across Oxbow Lakes, which give you a great introduction to the wetland bird life, but also a chance to see some of the species that you don't tend to see as much on the larger waterways down near Porto Joffre, or in the southern Pantanal. So it's a great opportunity to see some of the more secretive and skulking birds, and also just seeing them up close. This is a good example of that. It's a sun grebe. It's not actually a grebe, and it doesn't even like the sun. So it's not very well named. It's a member of the finfoot family, a bird that you'll often find close to sort of aquatic vegetation. They're looking for invertebrates. So on these smaller channels, such as the Pishaim River, you have good opportunities to see species such as this. Birds are another feature of the Pantanal generally, and around the Trans-Pantanera lodges, you have great opportunities to see, and see very well, photograph as well, many birds of prey. This is a black-collared hawk. You also can see great black hawk, savannah hawk, roadside hawks, ospreys, plumbeous and snail kites, and a whole range of species, crane hawks as well, all quite common around these waterways just off of the lodges along the Trans-Pantanera. And herons are, again, a feature of this area. It's a great area to get to know many of the species of the Pantanal on these smaller waterways. So this is the capped heron. This is the boat-billed heron, a species that you really have to go up the smaller creeks where there's quite dense vegetation to find. This is a colonial species that likes the dense clumps of vegetation, more nocturnal as well. And then this is the gem of all the herons that you could find in the Pantanal. This is the Agami heron. Quite often described as the most beautiful heron in the world. The species that is quite cryptic. They do like to keep to sort of overhanging areas of small channels. And it's a species that, if you do get to see it fishing, is really special to watch. They have this incredible dagger-like beak, which they're very successful at catching fish with. So it's a real treat if you can find this species. While exploring these areas, you can bump into all sorts of things. This is another picture that Brett took, and these are gira cuckoos. They're a non-parasitic species of cuckoo that are very widespread across Brazil, but often on early morning in this area, you may come across them in these huddles, which is very heartwarming to see. They've spent the night together to keep warm, because even in the sort of height of the dry season, it can get quite cool at night, and this species, a bit like our long-tailed tits sometimes, they will huddle together for warmth on cold evenings. And while exploring these areas, you have very good chances to see primates as well. So this is the black and gold howler, a species found across the Pantanal, and one that you'll often hear before you even see. It's maybe a brutal way to be woken up in the morning, but it's a great sort of introduction to wild Brazil, to when you've just arrived and you hear howler monkeys at first light reverberating the landscape. Their calls can be heard up to 3 miles away. And unusually for howler monkeys, this species is sexually dimorphic. So the females are a lovely golden colour, hence their name. and they're quite easy to see along many of the waterways. Species commonly found is the Azara's capuchin, often found around many of the lodges, even just coming to fruiting trees as well. Another highlight activity to do whilst staying at some of these lodges is to head out on a night drive. Often this will take you along the entrance track of the lodge you're staying at, or a stretch of the Pantanal itself, spotlighting for nocturnal species. This is one of the species you may find. It's the crab-eating raccoon, and there's a whole range of species you potentially can come across when heading out at night. Another one is the ocelot, one of the most spectacular of the felines you could come across, and they're possible both on night drives, but also this picture was taken by Brett at a dedicated hide at the South Wild Pantanal Lodge that we use on many of our trips. And some of these hides may not always be everyone's cup of tea, but it does, in the wider scheme, help protect areas of habitat. And just tidbits are left out in a forest clearing to give a fantastic opportunity to see this normally extremely elusive cat up close. The cats are not dependent upon the food source, and it does give a great opportunity to see them. But it's also very possible to see them in a more natural setting just by heading out on night drives as well. Really one of the most beautiful species of small cats. And when you head right down the Transpantanera, you reach this area known as Porto Joffre. So it's really not much there. It's a small fishing sort of community, and from that point, the road ends, and there is then the opportunity to head out on the rivers. And this is a map of the area that's now become known as Jaguarland. No guesses as to why it's called that. It really is famous now because this area that covers the Cuiaba River, the Three Brothers River, and various other sort of tributaries has been widely researched and found to be the area with the highest density of jaguars anywhere in the world. It's thought on average there are between 6 and 7 jaguars per 100 square kilometers within this area. No one knows exactly how many jaguars. Some estimates are between 70 and 90 different individuals, but it really represents the best place in the world to look for jaguars. And so from this point, you do all your wildlife activities on boats. So heading out in boats of varying sizes are available to go and explore the myriad of waterways. And there's a range of accommodation options for your bases here. So you can stay at hotels and again, converted fazendas, some of them converted fishing lodges, either at Porto Joffre or on some of the smaller tributaries found further north in the area. Or for many people, you can stay on a houseboat such as this. This is the Nature's Ass houseboat, which we use on many of our group trips, and it's moored right in the heart of basically the action with all the jaguar territories. So it's not even uncommon to have seen jaguars from sort of the top deck where you go for meals and drinks in the evenings, and this gives you the freedom to maximize your time out on the water at the best times of day. Also, if you do need to sort of have lunch brought to you because you're staying out with action taking place, lunch can easily be brought out to you. So there's more flexibility. And this is a beautiful area. It's fairly pristine in that although 95% of the Pantanal is privately owned and only 5% of it, surprisingly, is actually fully protected, this area has benefited from a rise in ecotourism, and the here is very well protected. You spend your time again exploring by boat, so you'll head out on early morning boat trips typically. You'll usually come back for lunch, but depending on what's happening, flexibility is sort of key in this area. It's a bit unlike other parts of the world, like Africa, for example, where it's really hot in the middle of the day and nothing's happening. It's actually quite a productive time for some of the wildlife here, surprisingly. So You can be out for much of the day to get in the shade and come back for dinner. So you'll have quite a bit of time in the evening once it gets dark quite early in this part of the world. So why this area is so special is because there is such an abundance of prey for the in this area. The sightings are incredibly reliable. This is a typical sighting that will be resting on the edge of gallery forest, which is their favoured habitat along these waterways. And this picture really demonstrates why jaguars are so powerful as well. So their bite force is the most powerful of all the big cats, pound for pound, and they can open their mouths to 100 degrees, which is why they do so well with their main prey here, the caiman. They're able to really sort of tackle these, large crocodilians, and it's because they're such a powerful cat. Jaguars of the Pantanal are also the largest jaguars anywhere. So it's thought that they're actually double the size of jaguars found in Central America, for example. A male jaguar here, this is a picture taken by my colleague Ben Sutcliffe of a big male. They can weigh 120 kilos, and the reason they get so big is because there's such an abundance of prey for them. They can really do well with having such a high density as well. And you can see jaguars in such a variety of settings as well when you're exploring this area. Quite often you may come across one resting on a tree. Also, it's great for seeing them actually in the water. And they are the most aquatic big cats. And they'll use these waterways like highways to essentially explore their territories and also to creep up on their prey. It's a fantastic way for them to remain concealed. Capybara are often resting. And unlike most areas of jaguar populations here in the Pantanal, and particularly this part of the Pantanal, they are very active in the day, which can be surprising because dry season. But this is when their prey, caiman and capybara, are resting in the heat of the day, often at the edges of the water. So jaguars will use the water and the shade of the gallery forests to actually hunt even in the middle of the day. This, if you're lucky, can be a typical sighting of one as well, where jaguars will be using cover to be sandbars and concealed areas of the riverbank where they may be able to sneak up on their prey. Quite often you'll see, if you're in this area for 4 or 5 nights, you'll get to see quite a range of behaviour, which is quite special in big cats. Often with lions, for example, in Africa, you'll mostly be seeing them sleeping. Some cats you may just see quite fleetingly. But in the Pantanal, you really get an opportunity to see quite interesting behaviour, which is particularly special. Of course, if you're very lucky, you can see them hunting. This was a picture, again, taken by my colleague Ben Sutcliffe last year. And it is becoming more common to see this quite raw but spectacular behaviour. And this picture really demonstrates just how powerful jaguars are. They are the 3rd largest cat in the world, and they are extremely muscular, extremely powerful predators. And it's quite impressive to see them taking on this prey. I just want to highlight as well that this area over the years has become more popular. The greater number of people out looking does mean the greater number of sightings. The more eyes, the more jaguars that are seen and reported. So it's something to have in mind, but it's good to know that all of the boatmen in this area are operating to a self-regulating code of good behaviour. So they're always keeping a respectful distance from any sightings, keeping rotation systems in place so everyone's getting a fair opportunity to see a sighting. This is a very busy sighting, which is not the typical, but it does show that if you come across an area like this, you can also just move on if you've already seen a jaguar, and the area is so big that you can easily just find your own. So you can enjoy picking and choosing between sightings, which is a nice place to be in. And there's many to enjoy in this area known as Jaguar Land. This is giant river otter, one of the most spectacular species. It's the largest otter in the world, and this area is, again, I think, the best place in the world to see them. The Quieba River and its sort of nearby rivers offer fantastic opportunities for giant otters all year round. Even when it floods in other areas, they will tend to head out to Oxbow Lakes, but during the dry season, the Quieba River is fantastic for catfish, which is their favoured prey. It's quite a slow-moving fish for them, so they do very well in this area. And they're a communal species of otter, so you'll see them in family groups, and quite often, if you're lucky enough to see them, but it's the enjoyment of a giant otter eating a fish is a sound you will never forget. And they are eating fish a lot of the day. Although they don't share their catches very often, they tend to eat as individuals. They do often work together to catch and sort of flush their prey, using those whiskers to help locate them in the murky waters, and eating about 3 kilos of fish a day. So it's quite common to get to see them actually with prey. If you're lucky, you'll also get to see them out of the water, which gives a great opportunity to appreciate just how big an animal the giant otter is. They're 6 feet in length, and really you can only appreciate that when they're out of the water. Some of the other species that you may come across while spending time in this area include Brazilian tapir, the largest land mammal in South America, and particularly towards the sort of later end of the dry season, sort of September, October, you do get more tapirs coming down to the waterways in the Jaguar Land area to cool off, particularly as it gets very hot at that time. Sometimes you'll see them crossing the rivers like this. And something else to look out for is Brazilian porcupine. This species is completely arboreal, and they use their prehensile tail to help them navigate the trees, just like a fifth limb to look for food up in the canopy. So it's another species that not seen on every trip, but you have a good chance of seeing. And while spending time in this area, there is a plethora of birds to enjoy, everything from parrots and birds of prey to sunbittens and black skimmers, and species such as this, the black-capped Donocobus, which is a species in its own family, very vocal and photogenic bird that will often perch up in riverside vegetation. And there's reptiles too. This is the green iguana, and quite often you'll find these basking in overhanging vegetation along these waterways. If you're lucky, you may come across yellow anaconda. They're not quite as big and famous as their giant anaconda cousins found further to the north, but yellow anacondas still very impressive, and they can really just turn up anywhere within the Pantanal. But certainly you have a very fighting chance of encountering one whilst exploring these waterways. So on from Porto Joffre, I'll explain a bit about the southern Pantanal, which is quite different in its character. And the access to the southern Pantanal is through the city of Campo Grande. And from there, you really reach most of the lodges by heading out on a main highway that takes you to the town of Miranda or Aquadiana, depending on how far you go. And from there, there's a range of lodges that can be accessed, each down their own sort of road, basically, that ends at the lodge. So some of these are much more remote than the lodges you find on the Transpantanera, accessed through charter flights because they're so remote. And the southern Pantanal has a lot more dry savanna, but it also has a range of species that you only find in the southern Pantanal. There's a lot of overlap with the north, but also many different species that are worth visiting the southern Pantanal for on their own. So even just arriving into Campo Grande, you may see blue and yellow macaws, even just along some of the roads. This species is actually increasing in numbers nesting within Campo Grande city itself. So even along the highways, in some of the palm trees that line the roads, you can see blue and yellow macaws, which is quite remarkable. But certainly when you visit the lodges in the South Pantanal, blue and yellow macaws are a feature and not a species that you're likely to see in the northern Pantanal. Another speciality that you can see in the north, but occur in much greater numbers in the south, is a species that you often see from the rear. It's the greater rear, and this species does very well in the sort of grasslands, particularly in the sort of southern part of the South Pantanal, where there's more of an influence from the Cerrado biome. And this species also does well. It's the pampas deer, and it's rarely seen outside of the southern Pantanal. It's again quite an endangered species, but most of the lodges in the South Pantanal offer good opportunities to see this species. And again, the lodges in the south are generally converted or still working ranches. This one is Posada Aguapay. It's one of the more rustic ones, but more accessible as well, and a fantastic for a cross-section of key species that you can see in the south. And one of the top reasons to visit the southern Pantanal is to look for these giant anteaters. Again, one of the most spectacular, peculiar, bizarre mammals on the planet. They are possible to see in the northern Pantanal, and there's a couple of areas where they're seen a little bit more frequently. But generally speaking, it takes a lot more luck to see them up there. They occur at much lower densities. And the southern Pantanal is the place to go and look for this species. Giant anteaters, they are a really wonderful animal to see. And they walk on their knuckles across the savannas and the floodplains of the South Pantanal. And they're looking for these termite mounds, which they use their incredible claws to rip open. Their 2-foot long tongue will come out, flicking out 150 times per minute, sucking up to 30,000 insects a day. But they won't completely devour a termite nest when they find it. For one, the soldier ants or termites will often be quick to defend once they realize they're under attack. But also the anteaters seemingly just know not to completely devour an entire colony. So they continue to return and have a food source. And it's quite possible at most of these lodges in the South Pantanal to get very good views of this species. They have very poor eyesight and rely mostly upon their sense of smell, which is very good. So as long as you remain downwind of them, and often if you sort of get within downwind and wait for one to amble towards you, you can get some phenomenal views. If you're very lucky, you may even see a mother carrying its baby, which is a real treat to see. Alongside it being good for giant anteaters, the southern Pantanal is also your best option if you'd like to try and see southern Tamandua, the smaller relative of giant anteaters. And this species is generally more difficult. They are primarily more nocturnal and crepuscular. They're also more arboreal as well, so they tend not to spend as much time out in the open. And when they do, they are harder to spot, being smaller in the landscape. But there are lodges such as Posada Aguapay and Bidas Pedras particularly that are good options to try and see this species. And another speciality of the southern Pantanal is armadillos. Armadillos do occur in the northern Pantanal, but generally they are rarely seen there. And the South Pantanal offers great opportunities to see one species in particular. This one, the yellow or six-banded armadillo, and many of the lodges within the grounds of the lodge itself, so you don't have to go far to see this fantastic animal. This species doesn't roll up into a ball, it relies upon its burrows for defense, and they're also diurnal, which is unusual for armadillos generally. But they are out in the day. So even when you come back to these lodges at lunchtime, in between having a drink, you can often see one of them running around. which is a great addition to the experience. Another species that's even more widespread in sort of drier habitats, another very charismatic species to watch. And sometimes if you do spend time with them, you may even see one of them defending its burrow. They do burrow, and they're known to even mimic predators. So sometimes even they'll mimic the rattle of a rattlesnake if they think something's approaching the burrow, making the sound of a rattle, pretending they're a rattlesnake inside to deter something from going inside, particularly if there's young inside the nest. So another highlight species. Again, all of the lodges in the southern Pantanal offer great opportunities to see hyacinth macaws. Many of them also have feeders like they do in the northern Pantanal, and parrots, parakeets, and other macaw species coming to these lodges. So where there's fruit put out in the mornings, you can sometimes get spectacles of huge numbers, sometimes into the hundreds, of turquoise-fronted parrots such as this, and Nande parakeets and other specialities. And from some of the most colourful to one of the most camouflaged, this is the common potu, doing its best to mimic a dead branch. And at many of the lodges in the forests, the local guides get to know the roosts of these beautifully cryptic birds. And so you can not only see them during the day, but also if you do go out on a night drive, it's possible to see them actually hawking insects at night and sometimes perched up. So you can see that phenomenal eye. And they're a really spectacular bird to watch. And some of the more remote lodges to mention, this is the Fazenda Barranco Alto. This is in one of the most remote parts of the Pantanal. It's an area with a very different landscape. So this is a picture of the salinas of the Barranco Alto property, are fairly unique to this area. These are alkaline or brackish water, and they're isolated and separate from the floodwaters. So they have their own kind of unique ecosystem. And these areas are great for seeing different species such as peccaries and coatis. This is the lodge at Barranco Alto, South Pantanal. It's been in the same family for many generations, and it just has 6 rooms. So it's a very intimate experience. You've got 13,000 hectares of property to explore, and it will just be the guests of the lodge there. So you can have a very intimate experience getting out on foot with the wildlife a lot. It's a really fantastic place for seeing tapirs coming to these bayous, these sort of wetlands that are seasonally flooded, freshwater. And again, things like coatis, you tend to get very high numbers of them in this area. These lodges are also some of the very best in the whole diversity of species that you can see. Great for owls like black-banded owl, and this one is the great horned owl, where many roosts of them are known. And going out at Barranco Alto, you can also explore a really pristine and beautiful river called the Rio Negro, which has essentially there's 2 properties along its entire length. But from Barranco Alto, you have the whole river, a huge stretch of it to explore. Unusually in the Pantanal, where most of the rivers are very rich in sediment and brownish, the Negro is black and sort of dark water, and it makes for a beautiful environment. And this area is an area where you do also have opportunities to see jaguars. So the jaguars along the Rio Negro at Barranco Alto have been researched and to an extent habituated, but because there's not a high frequency of boats going out, frequency of sightings is much less than the northern Pantanal. But if you want the opportunity to see jaguars and potentially a whole range of other species just yourselves, a longer stay at a lodge such as this does offer that opportunity, a place to go. And it's a great opportunity to see many of the species of bird that you also don't tend to see as well in the northern Pantanal. This is green and rufous kingfisher, and it's again great for giant and also neotropical river otters, which you tend to see more frequently along the Rio Negro than you do in other parts of the Pantanal. Lodge in the south to mention is this, probably the remotest lodge in the whole region. and it has a huge swathe of land which you can explore. It doesn't have a river, which is something to be aware of, but it's a very comfortable lodge, and it's been in the same family for, again, many generations. Rita, the owner, was the descendant of one of the first families of settlers to arrive in the whole Pantanal. So they've been there for a very long time, and it's still a working ranch, but is also the base for many wildlife research projects. So there's an ongoing study of tapirs here, and you have excellent opportunities to see them. Unlike many areas, you have the opportunity here to actually go out and look for them on foot, which is quite a thrilling experience. It's, again, absolutely fantastic for giant anteaters. There's big areas of dry savanna here, so it's fantastic for getting good close encounters with giant anteater. And again, armadillos, the yellow armadillo is very common here, but it's also the centre for the Giant Armadillo Project, which is a fascinating project being run by a group of scientists looking at the behaviour, conservation, ecology of one of the least understood species in the Pantanal, the giant armadillo. It's very difficult to see this animal, but if you do visit the lodge, there is a fair chance of coinciding with when the Giant Armadillo Project are also there. They're there for about 14 days each month, and through that time they're conducting various parts of their research. Sometimes that involves capturing individuals to fit them with satellite tags. Sometimes it's checking camera traps. But even just having conversations with them at dinner is a real insight into all things armadillo, and it's absolutely fascinating. Another key species, particularly that you see more of across the southern Pantanal, and particularly at Biodus pedris, is peccaries, both collared and white-lipped peccary. When I was last at Biodus pedris, we saw probably around 70, potentially 100 strong sounder of white-lipped peccary, which is just wonderful to see these numbers of animals. It's great for different bird life as well. Again, a species that you won't see in the northern Pantanal is the golden collared macaw, which you can see at this lodge and many of the others, and species such as cream-backed woodpecker as well, that love the more mature trees that sort of stand out in areas of savanna here. And a last lodge to mention, which is probably it is the most luxurious lodge in the whole of the Pantanal. This is Cayman Lodge, and it's unique because it has a huge swathe of land again, but it's the only place in the whole of the Pantanal where you can go out looking for jaguars in a safari style experience on land. In most other settings, in jaguar land in the northern Pantanal, and the occasional sightings along the Rio Negro of jaguars, you're viewing them from boats. But what's unique at Cayman is that this is the base, the NGO On Safari, who for many years now have been researching and habituating the jaguars of the Cayman property. They've modelled their approach on what's been done in southern Africa, particularly with leopards, and they helped to really raise awareness of the value of jaguars in the southern Pantanal, where there has been in the past more significant conflict with cattle and retaliation when jaguars have been killing cows. So not only has it really helped with jaguar conservation, it's also helped understand much more about the jaguar ecology within this region, and it offers in a very different context. So in the setting of through areas of grassland on the edge of forest, both in the day and at night. And many of these jaguars are very habituated to people, offering great photographic opportunities as well. And one last location to mention, which is actually just outside of the Pantanal, but is frequently added on to itineraries. It's a great place to finish up a trip, and that's Barranco das Araras, the sinkhole of the macaws. And this is probably one of the very best places in the world to photograph red and green macaws. There are clay licks in Peru and Ecuador, but this is one of the best places to reliably photograph this spectacular species flying against a sandstone backdrop at eye level, perched up, as well as flying below you. Around 60 pairs of macaws have at times nested within this sinkhole. So there's 2 different viewpoints which you can visit, and this offers a great opportunity to see these birds. It's near the town of Jardim, which is not too far from Bonito, and can easily be added on to the end of an itinerary, and a fantastic way to conclude a journey around what I think is one of the ultimate wildlife destinations within South America. Just to summarize, we've got a selection of group trips that we offer to the Pantanal. This is increasing almost year by year. But just to give you a quick overview of some of these trips, our wildlife for Pantanal is one of our most popular. It's a great kind of jaguar extravaganza, running throughout the season from June to October, focused completely within the northern Pantanal. We also have our wildlife of the North and South Pantanal, which is a trip led by a fantastic naturalist, Miguel. And that runs in June, when June is generally a good month, for giant anteater activity before it gets too hot. And it combines Posada Aguapay in the southern Pantanal with the Jaguarland area, as well as a couple of lodges on the Transpantanera. Then we have 2 dedicated photographic trips. Our Brazil Big 5 photo safari, led by Ben Sutcliffe, and our Pantanal photo safari, led by Nick Garbett, which is a slightly longer itinerary. Both of these trips offer outstanding photographic opportunities and are slightly slower paced to lend themselves to that. Both of them feature the wildlife of the North and the South. And then we have our Best of the South Pantanal, which is a trip led by a wonderful naturalist, Manuela, based in Campo Grande. And this visits Barranco Alto and Baidas Pedras, these 2 very remote lodges that are perfect for a more immersive experience in the Pantanal. This is a great trip for perhaps a second-time visitor, or for those that are not focused on jaguars but want to enjoy everything else. And we have, lastly, our Best of Brazil, which is our most comprehensive itinerary, distinct biomes of Brazil. So the Amazon at Cristalino Lodge, that's one of the most biodiverse parts of the Amazon in Brazil. It also stays at Posada Trijunction in the Cerrado, looking for maned wolves. And it then finishes with Cayman Lodge in the southern Pantanal for the most luxurious accommodation there, and that jaguar safari experience. So I hope that's given you a good overview of the Pantanal and what it's all about.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ian. That was fantastic. I'm sure you'll all agree it looks like a remarkable destination. I'm lucky enough to have been to the Pantanal myself, leading a photo safari, and I can assure you it doesn't disappoint. Whether you have a passion for jaguars or primates or giant river otters or amazing bird life, it really is absolutely exceptional. So please, if you have any questions, do send them in. We will look to get those answered for you. We have also got a poll, which I'm just going to launch for you. Bear with me a second. The poll is not launching for some reason. There we go. It's launching. A slight delay, it seems. So anyway, the poll is up and running. So please do let us know what documents you're interested in and what trips you'd like to find out more about. So whilst that's running in the background, I will ask some questions. We had some actually come in advance of the talk, so perhaps we should start with those first. The first question was, if you had to pick one lodge in the northern Pantanal, which one would it be?
In terms of picking a standout lodge in the northern Pantanal, it's quite tricky because there are pros and cons to many of the lodges there. But I think I would pick the South Wild Pantanal Lodge as the best kind of all-round halfway down the Trans-Pantanera. And it's one of the longest established and very much geared towards maximizing the wildlife experience with a variety of sort of setups. There is a canopy tower overlooking a jabiru stork nest. It's got the ocelot hide. There's the Pishaim River there, so you can do some fantastic boat trips as well as sort of walks in the forest. And it has many fruiting trees in the area, so this gives it a good chance for seeing tapirs as well, which are not always that easy to see in the northern Pantanal, but they are a bit more common around South Wild Pantanal. A couple of the others to just mention would be Araras Lodge, which is a very long established lodge as well. Great range of habitats there, and Amara Lodge, which is a slightly newer lodge with a beautiful area of forest as well. So yeah, I hope that helps.
Great, thank you, Ian. Another question which has come up a lot actually in a variety of different sort of guises, I suppose, but a lot of people are asking about temperatures throughout the seasons, and when therefore is the best time to go.
Sure, this is an important question. To give an overview, the temperatures in the Pantanal increase as the dry season continues. So if you want the lowest temperatures, we would recommend traveling in June and July. Temperatures by October, at the end of the dry season, are at their highest. It's not uncommon for it to be over 40 degrees by that time. Some other considerations to have in mind as well is that fires can be part of a natural cycle in the Pantanal, but they tend to have become more established in September and October. So the landscape can be a little bit more smoky in September and October, and less so in June, July, and August. And another thing to mention is that the Pantanal does receive cold fronts, which come up from the south. These occur on maybe sort of 10% of the days in June, July, and probably sort of mid-August, really. They're much more frequent to occur then than they are in September and October. And these cold fronts typically will bring quite cold and wet weather for usually a day or two. And when they occur, you do need to have warm clothes. The temperatures can drop to 10 degrees, and it can be quite wet, certainly overcast. And that tends to cause a dip in the sightings, particularly of jaguars, while they're occurring. But as soon as the cold front has passed, there tends to be then a spike in jaguar activity as they're kind of making the most of getting back out again with good weather. So as an overview, if you want to travel when it's a bit cooler, but you have a slightly higher risk of encountering a cold front, June and July would be the best time. Traveling in June, the water levels will be a bit higher, so it can be not quite so reliable for seeing tapirs and giant otters as well, because they can be more dispersed. But it tends to be a bit better for giant anteaters, which tend to become more nocturnal and spend more time in forested areas as the dry season intensifies in September and October. They tend to avoid the heat more. So sightings of anteaters are better earlier in the season. Sightings of otters and tapirs are better later in the season. Jaguars are pretty consistent throughout. And if temperature is your main concern, then going earlier is better as well. So hope that helps.
That's great. Thank you, Ian. We've also had some questions about the number of boats on the river, and roughly how many, and can they be a problem and things like that.
Sure. The number of boats has certainly increased, even in the last sort of 3 years, really. and it's well managed. It's important to explain that whilst it can seem concerning to see many boats around the area is very big, and it's very easy to head off and explore areas where you're not seeing anyone for sometimes several hours, down some of these more remote, smaller channels where you have every chance of encountering the key species on your own. So whilst having so many boats in the area reporting sightings is leading to an incredibly reliable situation for jaguar sightings and otters as well, it's important to be aware that you can avoid those areas if they are busy, and generally the boats will regulate themselves. So you could get sort of 10, 15 boats, maybe a maximum of 20 in an area, depending on the circumstances, the setting of the sighting. But once everyone's kind of had a sighting, they will tend to move on. Some boats may stay to see what's happening, but because there's such a frequency of sightings, you can keep moving on to find a jaguar on your own or stay with another one. So it does keep the situation fairly well regulated.
Thanks, Ian. I would say as well, from my experience, if you're interested in having your own jaguar experiences and you tell your guide that, then the chances you'll go up a channel with nobody else, and you might find a jaguar, you might not. So, but there are opportunities to enjoy amazing encounters without a soul around, which is fabulous. So thank you for that, Ian. We've also had some questions about birding in the Pantanal, and is there a way that you balance watching mammals and birds at the same time?
It's down to the trip you choose to do. If you're doing a tailor-made trip, you can customize that experience as much as you would like. And if you're joining a group trip, we tend to have a sort of specific focus for the group. That might be photographic, it might be on key mammal species, or it may be all wildlife. I would say all of our group trips will be enjoying most things that they come across, but in many of the situations, the priority will at least initially lie with getting some sightings of key species such as jaguars and otters first. So there will be plenty of opportunities to see the bird life, which is fantastic, very diverse, and constant into almost all areas that you'll be traveling through, and that species. And we'll try to balance trips depending upon the nature and the key focus upon seeing what we can find whilst looking for key species. But with some of our trips, we're not prioritizing the birds, often to the extent of they're not seeing key mammal species, because if we spent too much time in some areas, we perhaps would miss other highlights. So we try to balance seeing key highlightic and key species of birds as well, with seeing a good variety of things that we come across whilst exploring these areas. So not just focusing on one specific group too much.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. There was a question about camera gear, which I can probably answer as I lead photo tours. So someone said they'd like to know what to take, basically. So typically what I would suggest is you have a zoom telephoto lens, or if you're a bit more serious, you can always take a prime telephoto lens. So something you probably want a minimal upper focal length of 400 millimeters, up to 600 if you can. That's sort of ideal. And then jaguars can sometimes come remarkably close. So it's worth also probably having a slightly smaller lens, something like a 70 to 200, because I've had a jaguar swim within a meter of the boat, which is quite exciting. And the same for giant river otters. They can be quite curious at times. You never quite know how close things are going to get, so it's worth having a little bit of flexibility. So hopefully that answers questions on camera gear. But I would take a rain cover for your cameras as well, because as Ian said, you can get these cold fronts coming through with rain for a day, and trust me, when it rains in the Pantanal, it rains. So you want to be able to protect your camera gear. Another question that I can answer quickly, just to save a bit of time, is about boats and cover. Most of the boats don't have canopies on them; they're open, which greatly improves visibility and photographic opportunities. But you're only in the boats usually in the morning and in the evening, the afternoon, and you're in them for a few hours. So you're not in them at the heat of the day typically. So we try and escape the heat of the day on the boats. So that hopefully answers those questions. But Ian, a question maybe you can answer whilst I type a reply to somebody else is: are there many mosquitoes, and is malaria an issue?
Thanks, Brett. There are mosquitoes, of course, within the Pantanal, but they really kind of drop off in terms of their numbers and being a kind of a nuisance by sort of the start of the dry season. So by mid-June, you really don't see many. They become quite sort of scarce, actually, certainly during the middle of the day. They are only really a problem that you'll come across in the evenings, early mornings. Some areas can have more now, where you might be close to sort of water bodies, standing water bodies. You will find more mosquitoes, but the rooms are all very well screened. And besides sort of going out on a night drive, you tend not to be too exposed to them. Certainly when you're on the rivers, you're traveling often at speed or traveling during the day, so mosquitoes are rarely a problem. It's mainly on a night drive that you may want to put on insect repellent. Often I'd say more of a problem if you're doing a night drive is flying insects, not mosquitoes, but just general insects out at night that may be attracted to the spotlights or headlights of a vehicle. So you can look a little bit silly, but if you really want to protect yourself, a head net for these night drives can be useful, just to protect yourself from insects that if a vehicle stops can then be coming to the lights. So certainly having insect repellent there is a good idea. In terms of malaria, there is no malaria in the Pantanal, so you don't need to be concerned about taking anti-malarials, which is good to know. Region of Brazil that you need to consider anti-malarials for. There's not too much in the way of other diseases to be concerned with in the Pantanal. Dengue fever does occur, but in the dry season it's rare. So that should hopefully reassure you.
Thank you, Ian. Sorry, just typing some answers. I think we're probably going to have to leave it there, because otherwise we could probably keep on going all night. So what I will quickly say is that we're delighted to carry on with our series of upcoming Discover Wildlife evenings. So next week, I believe it is, we have Discover Whale Watching, and then many more, including Svalbard and South Africa on the 4th of November and the 6th of November. But on the 12th of November, for those of you that would like to actually see us in person, we're delighted to be doing an event at Lainston House just outside of Winchester on the 12th of November, focusing on Costa Rica. So if you'd like to come and see us in person and you'd like to find out more about Costa Rica, it'd be an absolute pleasure to have you along. I have to say a massive thank you again to Ian for a fantastic talk. The pictures were stunning. Seeing the wildlife brought back a lot of memories for me. I'm sure it did for many of the clients, but hopefully it's also inspired a lot of you to visit the Pantanal. And so thank you again to Ian, and thank you to all of you. It's been a really wonderful evening, and we really appreciate all your time, and also for the fantastic questions as well. For those of you that we haven't yet got back to, we will try and answer all the questions and get back to you. So thank you very much again, and we look forward to seeing you again soon.
Thank you all for joining us.
Thanks, Ian. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.